I'd used to say, well, we make robots. Well, today that description doesn't work so well because we have Roombas and we've got all sorts of automated things in our life. And so I would more describe it, if anyone's seen on TV, there are shows like How It's Made, and they'll show the equipment of how things are automatically being made and assembled. That's what we do.
Welcome to OwlSpeak, where we discuss what's going on at the Temple College of Engineering. I'm your host, Casey Tinney, who will let you in behind the scenes with our Temple Engineering faculty, students, and alumni. Today, we're excited to welcome alumni Stephen Maund, President and CEO of Demco Automation. Stephen, thank you for joining us.
Hi there. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you for coming over to Philly. I know. Where did you head over from?
I live in the Lehigh Valley, so it's a little bit of a drive.
A little bit of a drive. Okay. Is that where Demco's located?
Yeah, just south of it in Quakertown, Upper Bucks County.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
I guess we'll jump right into it. What was your major at Temple? You know, how long have you been out of the College of Engineering, and what are you doing now?
Yeah, I had a circuitous path, if you will. I started out here, and then I didn't have quite the finances to continue full-time, so I went part-time and started working, and I was doing that for some time until finishing the bachelor's in mechanical. So affordability factor is key for me, and one of the things that I see as an initiative on the Board of Visitors, actually I think it's imperative, actually having lived that and working and going to school virtually full-time in both.
Yeah, definitely having that experience of having to work while you're in school.
Exactly, and I think there are a lot of people out there that are in that same situation. The affordability factor is, a challenge. And, back then there were limited engineering school opportunities to be able to commute to save money as well. When you started looking at the tuition of some of the other institutions in the region, my decision was even more compelling to come to Temple University for that reason.
Definitely. I know Temple got its start as a commuter school, so it kind of still have students commuting today. So you mentioned the Board of Visitors. I guess could you explain for maybe our listeners who don't know what that is and what your role is?
Each one of the colleges or schools in the university system have a Board of Visitors. It's a collection of professionals, regional community members, alumni that create a board for the particular school to give input, guidance, and mentorship in various areas, whether it's new curriculum development, financial development of the school for donations and recruitment, as well as just getting a sense of what's happening in the region in these different technologies to help have a synergy between the university, the college, and the outer community.
Got it. So it's all alumni from...
Not all.
Not always? Okay.
Not always. There are also corporate leaders from other walks of life that are also involved. So it's a fairly diverse group, and that's important to be able to get different insights to better the College of Engineering.
Yeah, I mean, that's great to get the different perspective of like industry, alumni, different stakeholders. You mentioned your role was in affordability on the Board of Visitors. What exactly?
One of the things I've been working with the board and the dean and the school in general is to come up with ways to have more affordability. One of the initiatives we've been working on now for a couple of years is more internship programs within the college to mimic maybe something a little bit more like some of the other co-op based universities. However, rather than having a 5-year program, the goal would be to actually have a 4-year program with 2 summer stints of paid internships with companies, whether it be in the region or somewhere else, so that student not only graduates with a 4-year degree, but also has close to a 5-year degree program such as our neighbor here in Philadelphia, but a paid internship through the 2 summers. There are a couple of benefits to that, one of which the student gets significant experience before graduating, and then some of those can also turn into extended interviews and work experience where once graduating they could potentially even become an employee or a team member in the company that they were interning. So it's, I think, a big advantage. It fits with the strategies of the university and attacks the affordability question when you start thinking about a paid internship for 2 different summers.
I think that's great with the internship opportunities. You see a lot of students go right into full-time where they were interning.
Yeah, case in point, even with my company, we've had numerous interns over the years from many different colleges and universities, anything from Northeastern, Drexel, Lehigh, Duke, to Temple, Penn State, and others, Lafayette. We actually, case in point, have one mechanical engineer at this point that we hired last year. It was a paid intern through the summer at our company, and it worked out very well. And he's on board and great contributor to our technical solutions.
That's great. I think also from the employer standpoint, you get kind of a trial run, which you don't get usually when you're hiring somebody.
Absolutely. It's interviewing is challenging. You only can get a very small snapshot of what the individual's like, how they'll fit, what their skill sets are, what makes them tick. All of those things are important when somebody comes on board, and not only from the employer standpoint, but the employee or the person working at a company also needs to understand the culture of the company and how that fits and what the work is about. And, is it challenging enough? Is it too challenging? A lot of different facets to that. So I think it's a great combination.
Yeah, definitely a mutually beneficial program.
Yeah.
You mentioned your company, Demco Automation. So let's dive into that. You're president and CEO, correct?
Sure. Yeah, it's a 35-year-old company. I was not the founder of it.
Okay.
My career started out in various capital equipment engineering companies that develop systems for semiconductor industry, flat panel display industry, automation and robotics. And through that time, a while ago, back in the early 2000s, I was the director of engineering at this company, developing automated processing systems for manufacturers globally, mainly U.S. and Central Americas. And through that process, then ended up acquiring the company in 2010, 2011 timeframe. With working with the founder to acquire it. And so that's how I've now become president CEO. But before that, I was director of engineering. Before that, program and product manager positions, engineering positions. I'm still barely involved in the technical aspect of what we do because the automation systems that we do create are one of a kind generally, and they've never been done before. They're geared around developing an automated process for manufacturing products, anything from medical device and pharmaceuticals to commercial industrial products, electronics, defense industry as well. So, excuse me, we have a pretty diverse industry sector touch, not so much in the food industries. That's a little bit more of a niche for others, but and our systems are in I think at this point 20 or 21 states and 10 countries.
Wow.
Yeah.
Spread out pretty far.
It is. Our most recent international shipment was to Central America and Costa Rica. We have equipment in Europe and Canada. We've had equipment and are going to have equipment in Southeast Asia soon again. And that's all done out of our facility in Upper Bucks County.
Okay.
We have a 35,000 square foot facility with a very integrated infrastructure for everything we need to supply the equipment and service it out of our facility.
Okay. I do want to go into automation. I think when people get into a career in engineering, maybe they don't know where they want to go. So what is automation? You mentioned manufacturing. Are you helping companies figure out a system to manufacture their products?
Yeah, it's a good question. One up in the Lehigh Valley, we have one customer, CF Martin and Company. They make acoustic guitars. They're one of the leading acoustic guitar manufacturers in the world. They've been around for probably 200 years now. But on that particular product, there's the neck of the guitar where you have the frets, where the wires are. Well, there's a fingerboard there, and the wires are inlaid into the fingerboard. And it used to be that somebody would actually cut them and file them flat all by hand, and you figure there are quite a bit of frets on the neck.
Yeah.
Coupled with the number of product that they produce every day. They're producing hundreds a day. So we developed a custom system to take the fingerboards and trim and bevel the frets. So there are a couple advantages to that. First off, the fingerboard is generally finished at that point. And some of the guitars are anywhere from maybe $5,000 to $20,000 a piece. So once that fingerboard is done, you don't want to have any defects because you've got to make it over again. So operators have variability when they're hand routing something like that. Also a safety factor for the operator so that they're not getting injured. It all happens automatically. And also consistency. So those are examples.
Okay.
So it's not always about better productivity. Sometimes it's about safety and keeping people safe. And safety isn't just a matter of getting hurt from touching something or something like that. It can be carpal tunnel syndrome.
Yeah, overuse.
Any of those repetitive tasks can create those sorts of issues. Back issues, arm, shoulder issues. When the product is heavier, and to be able to manipulate it 8 hours a day, you can imagine if you have something, even if it's only a couple of pounds, and you're moving and twisting over hours a day, repeatedly, sorry about that, it becomes a little challenging. So.
Yeah, that's very interesting, the wide range of industry products you work with. I'm sure you had to learn a lot about a guitar to help them do that, and then you have to learn a lot about surgical products.
Mm-hmm. And it is the interesting part of it because nothing is ever the same. It's always a different industry. We're becoming an extension of that engineering team from the customer and learning their process and becoming pseudo experts in their product, even though we're not part of their company, but we're teaming with them on a long-term basis.
Definitely. I know you mentioned you've worked at Demco for a while prior to becoming president and CEO. What did your path look like, and how has your responsibility and role changed over time?
Good questions. Over time, technology in capital equipment and machinery has changed significantly, along with, again, I mentioned I was in the semiconductor industry. That thing has really taken off through the 80s, 90s, 2000s, and becoming more sophisticated. Control systems are much more sophisticated today. Motion control, motors, servo motors, stepper motors, and other sorts of voice coils. All sorts of motion control products are now available where they weren't before. In the engineering world, you would design these things in a very customized way for your application because they weren't available out in the marketplace. Today, we have a lot more in the way of available products like motor selections sub-assemblies for whatever motion control it may be, or of other sorts of mechanisms. So we've been able to, over time, evolve in this industry to provide more complex processes with better interaction with the users, higher flexibility. Along with all of those things, the product selections or the things we need to process are much more varied. It used to be that you'd run one thing, it wouldn't change for 4 years. But now with the advent of things just as simple as a smartphone, you can see how often the product changes. The life cycle of a typical smartphone is probably about 18 months.
That's crazy.
So when you start thinking about the form factors, technology, and all of those things, and how automation needs to adapt to the perpetual change in products, not to mention the fact that the return on investment is another portion of it, that business case, and being able to reuse capital equipment. So our mantra is to have highly flexible offerings for our customers that can be adaptable, scalable, flexible, reconfigurable, so that by the time we get, let's say, 18 months down the road and there's a new product variant, you're not mothballing the equipment. In cases, it can be millions of dollars of contract value or worth for the customer, and start over again. You need to be able to quickly implement these things to be competitive and stay ahead of your particular competitors in whatever business you're in.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it's a very quickly adapting industry, and you guys got to stay on top of that.
Yeah, the technology, you definitely need to be at the forefront. We use quite a bit of off-the-shelf industrial robots, vision systems for vision inspection to look at every component and make sure that it is, in fact, to spec, along with some of the other things that I talked about.
Got it. So I'm sure being president now of the company, your day-to-day is very different from when you were, starting out as an engineer.
Yeah.
How do you think your engineering degree prepared you to become a leader at work? Because it's very different skill sets on the surface, but how do you think that helped you?
I would like to say probably in this podcast that an engineer is probably one of the most versatile degrees that is out there in any institution. Or any profession. You have analytical skills. You're looking at things to figure out either how they're working, why they're not working, and looking for a solution. It's a solution-based profession. And I almost don't care what you may do in society. The goal is always to find a solution and move forward. So the training that an engineer gets in school prepares them for understanding how to find solutions, and taking those tools out of the toolkit and using them to create the best solution possible, and in a practical way. Practicality is important when running a business. Economic analysis and figuring out cost structures and resources that are required, all of these things over time are skill sets that a good engineer will have. That also, communication is another important one, and be able to communicate ideas. And it's more than just talking in a meeting. In the case of an engineer, we have other methods of communicating in technical specifications and drawings and schematics and operating procedures and things of this nature that convey ideas. So for me, especially in what our company does, the technical background and knowledge to me is critical. We have a very high risk business operation because they're one-of-a-kind systems. It's very easy to begin eroding the financial success of that, whether you're estimating, and now you're underwater on, for example, the material costs, or underestimating what it takes to actually design and build this equipment, and overrun on labor hours. All of those things erode margins and erode the financial success of that individual component or that system. So to have the background in understanding how these things work and coming up with the approach in the beginning at the front end in a good way, that where you, beyond a reasonable doubt, know that you can produce a system that will be successful is imperative. Because if you pick the wrong way in the beginning, you're done. And if you have too many of those, much like the stock market, if you have too many losers in your portfolio, you're not going to be successful. You need to have more winners than losers. So the same thing in engineering and technical efforts. You need to be successful more often than not.
Definitely. I think that's very well said, and paints like a broader picture of, all the skills that go into being an engineer and then becoming a leader. We've had Tom Edwards, a professor, on here talk about how, I think he said, the majority of CEOs are engineers, and hearing you explain why that is, it's very interesting, and I think that's something that's important for the students to hear as to what kind of path they can go down.
Yeah, Tom and I have had discussions on this topic before, and yeah, we had the same outlook in that, and I had these outlooks based on what I've seen over my career, and to have that skill set, I think. Is a big advantage. I mean, even in other industries, you start looking at the banking industry or others, that technical background and the analytical mindset is used even in, for example, the banking industry. Maybe not, looking at velocity or payloads or structural strength. It may not be any of that, but the analytical aspect is still there.
Definitely. I think let's circle back to your time at Temple. What do you think specifically at Temple? I know you mentioned you had to take some time off to work, but what else were you involved in that you think helped prepare you for a successful career?
Yeah, a good engineer needs to have the analytical skills as well as the practical application thereof. And, to me, the College of Engineering here provided a good mix of the application of the science as well as the analytical and theoretical aspects, and how they tie together to make a truly successful engineered solution. I think back, and I'm on a school board, as I think I see in many ways how students don't get the understanding of, what is algebra good for? What's calculus used for?
Yeah.
What are these things really used for? And the thing I found here was that there was a connection of the why and how to the theory. And it is so critical if you're going to be a good engineer. I've seen this time and time again. I've seen it in people I've managed in the past, where I have one individual with a master's degree and another one that's a technician working on a solution, one of which looks at it in one way and the other looks in the other way, but it's almost like the crossing of outlooks. They don't connect because neither one of them have the experience that the other has. And that's what I think happens here, from what I've seen and what I've experienced, melding those two things together.
Got it. And I think that's important, to be able to see both sides in the workplace. You have to put yourself in the brain of other people and figure out what's going on in the situation. You mentioned you're on a school board. Mm-hmm. Is that, what are you allowed to share, what county?
Sure, yeah. This is Southern Lehigh School District in Lehigh County.
Okay.
It's a 4-year elected term, about halfway through it right now. Actually, I'll be finished, unless I continue, but finish in November next year. Yeah.
And then how did you get involved in that? Is
Well, that's a good question. Some of it had to do with, I've always been very focused on outreach in education. One of the significant reasons I wanted to acquire the company was to be able to give back from a corporate standpoint, be able to give in a civic way to the community more than I could as an individual. And just to divert for a minute from the school board, one of the things we've done over time at Demco Automation is outreach to the schools in different ways: donations, scholarships, as well as bringing students in for tours, bringing teachers and administrators into our facility to understand what happens in these big white boxes along the highway.
Yeah.
As we drive past the industrial parks, you say, well, what the heck are in these buildings? And there aren't a lot of people that know what are in them. And they're not always warehouses. They're manufacturing of advanced things. I mean, when I think about some of the things that we provide, they're in these big boxes along the road. And I think it's important to take our knowledge base and what we know and about professions and industries and technology and share that with schools, students, parents. So we've been doing that since, for a long time, and bringing students in for tours all the time, whether it be engineering-bound students for university or vocational technical students for technician positions and things of that nature. We have teachers coming in to talk about technology for Project Lead the Way in public schools and things of that nature. So it's been one of my goals to be able to give back in that way, because we're one of the few companies, I think, that can convey that and show what's out there and give students an understanding of what engineering careers are, what technicians do, as well as business operations, and how all those things work together to make a successful company. So through that, getting back to the school district, there were just challenges at the time, 4 years ago with remote learning and other aspects of public education. So I never served in the military, and I figured that this would be a good way for me to volunteer my time and, I think, expertise and logic to that situation. And I think I've been able to do that.
Definitely. I think that's great. Like you said, showing students through Demco, like earlier you said, why do I need to learn algebra? What is calculus good for? Well, you show this is, if you take the time to learn these concepts, this is a career you could go into, and then, taking that back to the Board of Education and like helping implement that in schools. I think that's really important for, furthering engineering education and STEM education.
Yeah, there are really a few different pillars to that. Not only does the student need to understand what an engineering career is and what are the different engineering careers, There are subsets in every discipline, but a lot of kids don't really understand the ins and outs of what the reality of it is, instead of just the Wikipedia definition of a mechanical engineer, for example. And then the other part of that is the parents, and the parents understanding what the career is to help guide and mentor their child in understanding what they may want to do. It's not, and this isn't meant to be disparaging in any way, is we don't, the world runs on more than just the few professions that are continuously promoted in society.
Of course,
That's the point. And I think engineering, technology, manufacturing, and those things have taken a second seat to some of that. And it's to the detriment of our economy and our nation in a lot of ways, because we have an inherent dependency on other parts of the world that can make it challenging. And we've seen this, for example, through the pandemic. 97% of all generic pharmaceuticals are in Asia. They're manufactured in Asia. And you see some of the things that have happened over time that can make it challenging for us from a supply chain and availability standpoint for critical things and in what we need to do for our infrastructure in our country. So then anyway, parents and then teachers, it's imperative too for the educational institutions to understand these things as well, to properly guide students into making good decisions and things that they may never knew about. They never knew about this career, and now they have a better understanding of it.
Yeah, I think that's great to implement early because, when you came on, we were talking before, I was like, oh, he was a mechanical engineering major. Whenever I speak to someone who's a mechanical engineering major, formerly mechanical engineering, I never know what career field they're in because there's so many different ways you can go with that degree route. And I think that's important to show in schools like you were talking about. It's always, they're like, I'm in the auto industry, I'm in something else. There's so many different ways you can go with mechanical and other engineering degrees.
For sure.
So how else are you staying involved at Temple? I know you said Board of Visitors, or I guess what's your reason for
That's probably one of the major ones. I'm involved in attending sports here.
Yeah.
Between basketball and football. I don't get out to too many other sporting events. Sometimes rowing at the regattas. I try to get to one of those once a year. Giving presentations at various schools, but including Temple on technology and engineering and automation, I think is a good way to, give the introduction to students that are maybe already in that field to understand what it is. Again, internships and mentoring, those are important things to me from a standpoint of that. And those are probably most of the ways I'm involved with the college and the university.
Got it. And then I guess, what would you say to someone who wants to get involved as an alumni? What do you think they should do? What steps should they take?
Yeah, it's a good question. The College of Engineering has evolved over time to have more outreach to alumni and students. Back in the day, it wasn't, I would say, not quite that way. And I think the administration in this particular college has put a high focus on having that involvement with certain activities. I mean, things as simple as Dunk and Dine, for example, and getting students and alumni out to basketball games and things such as that, I think are important ways to build the rapport with a student early on, so that they maintain involvement. My brother went here as well for electrical engineering, but I would say I'm probably more involved than him, and part of that reason is the disconnect of students from when we were here and not having that continuous touch point from the college to alumni. But that has changed, so that's a big difference now than what had happened previously.
Yeah, get involved early, stay involved as an alumni. If you could give any advice to a current student, what would you tell them right now?
All right, that's a great question. There's so many things. But the engineering societies is a simple one, and I know quite a few students do participate or at least become a student member, but getting involved from that standpoint in meetings and tours and presentations in those societies is a good thing. I would say that putting your best foot forward and being the proactive person and not the reactive one is critical. If you want to make the most out of your career, be proactive. If you're proactive and you do the right things and you hone your skills as an engineer, the other parts of it will take care of itself. You will have advancement. You will have challenging projects and programs that you're working on at your company. A lot of that has to do with the gumption and outlook of the individual to the rest of the team. And if you don't put yourself out there, and I know it's challenging for engineers sometimes, so whoever's listening, put yourself out there and be the best that you can be, and show that to individuals in your team so that you become a critical part of it. That to me is really important.
I think that's a really positive, nice note to end on. Thank you, Stephen, for stopping by. We really appreciate it.
Sure. It was a pleasure. I enjoyed it. And thanks again. Have a great summer.